I used to complain and blame everything else except for my state of mind, and it wasn't long until I realized that complaining is nothing but a classic form of self sabotage. And research suggests that people complain on an average at least once every minute during daily conversations, especially when it's about work, relationships, or everyday stressors. It might feel good in the moment and a harmless way to let off steam, but constant complaining actually quietly trains your brain to focus just on the problems instead of possibilities or solutions. Over time, this can trap you into a victim mindset and make you feel powerless. So, in this video, I wanted to break down how complaining can trap us in a cycle and instead how we can flip the narrative to reclaim back our peace and power. From noisy neighbors to what others said or did, being stuck in traffic, bad design, poor service, ranting about a bad boss, or a job we don't enjoy. It is estimated that people complain almost 15 to 30 times a day. Complaining is focusing actively on the negatives of a situation and relishing that narrative without even realizing it. Because when we complain, we enjoy it more than actually looking at solving the problem. And some of this behavior is so subtle that it can easily pass off as a conversation between family or friends. That is until we view it through the eyes of self-awareness, and then it tells a different story. And chronic complaining is associated with elevated stress levels and also known to shrink the hippocampus, which is the area of the brain that is associated with emotional processing and memory. Maybe you feel that the situation is out of your control. But even when that's the case, the one thing you can do for yourself and your body is to conserve energy so that when an opening for a solution is presented by life, you can spot it. But typically, we are so focused on complaining that we drain ourselves out and in some cases quickly slip into a lower energy state of feeling worthless and enter into a negative spiral. We don't see that by festering in harmless complaints, we pull ourselves down. We get caught up in that energy state and in that frequency of being disgruntled. And such situations keep coming back into our life because we are stuck in a pattern of that frequency. Ultimately, the thoughts that we get most caught up in represent a frequency, like a radio channel, that we subscribe to unknowingly and unconsciously keep tuning into. So why do we complain? A lot of the times we complain simply because we don't know about the harmful or limiting effects of complaining on ourselves and others. Another reason why complaining becomes a habit is when we have the tendency to ruminate, to overthink negative thoughts. And when we get involved in a negative thought spiral, those thoughts can spill over as a trigger when we feel powerless and we don't see a way out. And often complaining can be an unhealthy coping mechanism to manage stress and discomfort, and it reveals our inability to accept the things that are outside our control. At times, we are unaware of the lethargy or resistance we might feel towards taking the necessary action or attempting to find a solution. Sometimes we complain over a decision or choice that we made, and it's normally because we don't want to accept the responsibility of the necessary action when something goes wrong. The way you see yourself and the world quietly shapes the assumptions that you make about others. When what someone says hurts us, our reactions reflect more about us than them. In any conflict, both sides contribute equally no matter who is at fault. If we don't do the work in recognizing our responsibility to learn to navigate relationships through transparent communication, we will always find ourselves in toxic puddles. And whenever someone says something intentionally to offend us, if we don't believe what they say is true deep down, we will never be offended by what they say. And at times when we find fault in others, it's because we are trying to fit them into a box of our own making. Many people might not be similar to you, and that's why they're not intentionally hurting you, but it's probably just their mannerisms through their cultural differences, or their quirks and habits, or their background or circumstances, or purely due to their ignorance. Most people are caught up in their own bubble and don't even realize that you are sensitive to certain remarks or behaviors. In any case, it is a sign of poor boundaries when we decide to act passive aggressive and complain. It's because we don't want to feel the discomfort of being assertive and communicating our needs calmly to the person involved. Now, maybe complaining isn't just about the situation and how we feel about it, but also a cultural habit and a part of the environment that we spend more time in. Maybe the workplace you're a part of, or the family you belong to, the community, or the peer group that you hang out with. We find that we often complain because we are used to seeing others do it. Now, complaining is also a habit that we use to connect to the people who are close to us and to find a sense of solidarity. But unless the other person can help you widen your perspective, it just becomes co-rumination and only worsens the problem. And believe it or not, sometimes we use complaining to get over the awkward silence of talking to people and just to socialize. When we are complaining, we share it with people close to us to get assurance, or purely enjoy sharing that negativity with someone. And this is a deep-rooted tendency that we might not even notice or be aware of. Alright, so what are the actions that you can take? Practice gratitude. Research from University of California, Davis indicates that regularly practicing gratitude can lower cortisol, the stress hormone, by 23%. And this reduction in cortisol is associated with improved overall well-being. Commit to the intention to not complain. And notice whenever you feel the urge to complain, what are the triggers like? Journal or write about it. Observe if it is because the situation is making you feel powerless in some way. And also note down the changes that you can make from your side. Sometimes it is important to provide critical feedback and state your needs assertively. Learn to provide actionable feedback and discerning between that versus complaining. And if you can't change the situation, then focus on the actions you can take to make yourself feel better and reach a state of acceptance. Move by adding exercise, dance, or going for a walk. Listen to music or listen to people you love. Feel the emotions more deeply, just observing what you are feeling inside. Or write about things, write about how you're feeling, write your thoughts down, and finally do some breath work. Deep breaths are also very effective. All these practices help to shift your state into a higher vibration. So first, let's understand the difference between venting, complaining versus ranting. Venting can be a healthy form of expressing your emotions, especially when you feel like, I just want to talk about this with someone. Venting, when done with self-awareness and a willing listener who can help you widen your perspective, can be more productive, and ideally it can help you reach clarity and give you the necessary support you need. Complaining, on the other hand, can be repetitive and habitual, and although it's not always accompanied with intense emotions, in some cases it can also be passive, but when it becomes chronic and solution averse, that's when it can be a big problem. So ranting is typically an emotional outburst which is one-sided and without regard for the listener's capacity to help most of the times. So it can lack self-awareness, and normally there is a lot of dramatic storytelling or narratives in the head, and the goal is just to dump your emotions onto another person without regard for their capacity to listen or complete disregard for how it affects them. The outcome is typically not constructive. And as much as you can, try and self-reflect on a problem before you bring it to others, so that you feel more self-reliant and you're able to solve it on your own whenever you can. But if you still feel blocked, you can certainly take it to others, but with a slightly different approach. What you can do is you can focus more on how you feel and then structure the conversation in a constructive way, saying things like, my assumption is this because I feel this. For example, you can say something like, I feel upset because I believe that that person is disrespecting me. And the listener would then go ahead and help you deconstruct that story or narrative, asking you more deep diving questions or inquiring questions like, why do you feel that way? And then you can go ahead and explain the reasons you feel that way, and they might be able to help you see an alternate perspective or approach a solution. Standing up for ourselves and sharing hurts with the people close to us, there's nothing wrong with that. But when we focus on ranting about situations we have no control over, instead of things that are in our control that we can change, we miss a big perspective. True story, in my life there have been several situations or decisions that I had no control over, that I worried about and complained about. But in the long run, it has always ended up being the best decision, and against my better judgment taught me something valuable. Alright, I would love to hear from you. What's one small change you'll do this week that will help you complain less and focus more on the solutions? Share it down in the comment section below. And as always, if you enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up and subscribe for more insights on living a conscious and fulfilling life. Thank you.